Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Yeah. What a day. How you doing? Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. How is everybody doing? We're fantastic over here. Still cold and rainy here in Burbank. Today's Wednesday, March 4th. 63 days into the new year. 302 days left. Yeah. As always, we are live from the truthfunders.com studios right here in rainy, wet, cold Burbank, California. Sun cracked a little bit today. Truth Funders. Do you have a book, an expedition, invention, or paranormal documentary you need to get funded? Go to truthfunders.com. Truth Funders, the number one source of backing your project into the fringe. WBGU 88.1. I have no idea what that is. I have no idea. We're broadcasting from there? No. But Monday, March 9th, KGRA. Syndication, man. Syndication. Taking over the world. One station at a time. All right. Excited about that. For KJCR and the Game Changer Network, I'm your host, your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. How is everybody doing? I'd like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. Welcome. This is Fade to Black. Tonight, Nick Pope will be joining us. M.O.D. Wasn't that a band in the 80s? M.O.D.? Somebody's going to tweet right now. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. Come hang out in the sandbox. Hashtag F2B. TalkStream Live. Tune in. Spreaker. KGRA. iHeartRadio sent us a notice today. You're still in review. Review? What do you got to review? Come on. I hope they review this show. Come on, iHeart. Quit playing around. All right. Yeah, we had switched servers. Dedicated NSA free stuff. Oh, man. So some of the parts of the country still aren't up and running. Down here in Southern California, I don't have my own website. But right down the street from here in Burbank, people have it. I don't get it. But so there you go. But if you can hear me right now, you are fine wherever you are. Hello to everybody over in the Spreaker chat room. Hello to everybody in Twitter. It is all good. All right. I am excited tonight. Nick Pope. Last night we had Linda Moulton Howe on, and we were talking about Nick Pope and John Burroughs. Tonight, it's a coinkydink. Tonight, Nick Pope is on with us. And always a great show with Nick. I warned him today. I said, Nick, tonight you're coming out of the box, man. Go ahead, Jimmy. that Nick talk, that Nick accent. I wonder where he's from. Anybody know where Nick Pope is? What part of England? I got to ask him tonight where the accent is from. I can usually tell. Nick, I just can't. I can't place it. All right, let's get a few things out of the way really quick. Faders.org. All of your Faders gear is there. www.faders.org. www.shopfaders.org. It's free. It's fun. Become a Fader Not today. Go get all your gear. Get the mugs. Those Fader mugs are cool. I was talking about that last night on the show. I'm going to order a box of those, man, a case. Start giving those things away. Those are really cool. I want everybody to have one. But did I just say that? I'll give them away to first-time callers, all of you Fader Knots. All right, let's see. Where are we at? Contact in the Desert. Tonight, Nick Pope is with us. He'll be at Contact in the Desert. Everybody is going to be at Contact in the Desert. You want to be there, too. And we are giving away tickets. Tomorrow night, we're going to give away 5 more. Gave away 5 last week on Fader Night. Tomorrow night, we're going to do it again. And all you got to do, just go to jimmychurchradio.com. If you can log in to jimmychurchradio.com, go over, click on Contact in the Desert. That's all you got to do. The contest link is there. It'll take you over to the Jimmy Church landing page. Just enter, and maybe tomorrow night I will be calling your name. Giorgio Tsoukalos, George Norrie, Nick Pope, Linda Moulton Howe, John Anthony West. Giorgio will be on with us in about 2 weeks. I'm excited about that. He sent us an email. I didn't get it till last night after the show. He said, I want to come into the studio and do it live. I was like, let's do this. And then Wobo was like, no. I just called her out. No. Because we have to clean. We have to clean the studio. We have to clean. I was like, man, he won't mind my messy pigsty. She said, if you clean the studio, then Giorgio. So I have to clean the studio. Hey, internet just came back right in front of me. Holy mackerel. I just got 5,000 emails just popped up. Yeah, everything with these new servers, that meant email too as well. Okay. It's back. It's good. We're all good now. If we are last, Los Angeles is last on the server list, I suppose everybody else around the country is doing just fine. Okay. All right. You guys ready? Let's get this show cracking, fired up. Check this out. Today, this is why you come to Fade to Black right here, right now. Just listen to this. Today, actor Ron Moss is 63 years old. Ron Moss played Ridge Forrester on the soap opera The Bold and the Beautiful. Now, wait a minute. You say, what? Church, you've stooped to a new level. Oh, no. No. Ron Moss became involved in music at the age of 11, learning drums, guitar, bass, and he formed a group called Player. He was the bass player in Player. That's right, the Player. Ron Moss, Ridge Forrester on The Bold and the Beautiful, had one of the greatest songs in the history of the known universe, Baby Come Back. That's right. Ron Moss today is 63 years old. Happy birthday, Ron. And I went and watched a bunch of old videos of Player, Baby Come Back. And I got to tell you, man, that was the song. Back when I was in high school, freshman dance, sophomore, senior prom, all those homecoming proms. And that slow down, that's it, man. It was Baby Come Back. That was the track, wasn't it? Baby Come Back. Ron Moss. Okay, that's why you come to this show. You just learned something. I hope everybody tonight after the show, just go on YouTube and click on Player, Baby Come Back. Go search that, man. Amazing song. Also today, actress Catherine O'Hara one of my all-time favorites, 61 years old. You know Catherine, of course, Beetlejuice, Lemony Snicket's, Home Alone. But that's not what she's known for. No, she's known for Christopher Guest. She was in Waiting for Guffman. She was in Best in Show. She was in A Mighty Wind. She was in For Your Consideration. And she slayed in every one of those movies. I love me some Catherine O'Hara. Catherine, happy birthday, 61 years old. Our dead guy's birthday today is Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan. He was an African-American inventor. 1877 to 1963. He saw it all, man. 1877 to 1963. So he saw horses and he saw Corvettes. He died at 86 years old. Why do I say that? He invented one of the coolest things ever that you deal with every single day of your life, about 20 times a day. Some of us 100. What did he invent? He invented the 3-position traffic signal. African-American inventor, Garrett Morgan. That's why you come to Fade to Black, right there. Garrett Morgan. Man, if you're listening, Garrett, you have no idea how important you were to the world. 3-position traffic signal, African-American inventor. Unbelievable. Okay. All right. Don't forget, Monday, March 9th, we are syndicating, and KGRA is our first station that we're syndicating to. I don't know if we're going to ever need to go anywhere else, but we're syndicating. And I'm excited about that, expanding the Fade or Not family. Again, I was talking to Race today. We're taking over the world, and we're starting right here. And I'm excited about that. So there you go. March 9th is going to be a big show for everybody. Having Game Changer Network that says it all, Game Changer, and us, Fade to Black, and then KGRA, the Global Radio Radio Alliance. The implications of all of this is huge, and syndication is a big deal, and we are very, very proud to have them. I'm going to say this: allow us to syndicate on their station. So thank you. That'll be Monday. All right. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Facebook is JimmyChurchRadio.com. YouTube is Fade to Black. Everything is easy to find. It's all Fade to Black or JChurchRadio or something. Just follow, like, and subscribe. Stay up to date. Tonight we have Nick Pope, MOD. Tomorrow night, Dr. Robert Davis. It's going to be a Fader night / Dr. Robert Davis ufology night. Call-in number tonight is 323-825-5045. You can Skype in Fade to Black 14. Now you can email throughout the show. Now that I have email, you can do that. It just came back. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You can also go to jimmychurchradio.com. Go to the contact page. You can shoot me an email through there. I say it every single night. I don't get the emails directly. They go through the producers here. Producers read them. If it's good, they send it to us in here, okay? And if it's smart, I read it. It's that simple. Okay, if you have any questions for myself or Nick Pope tonight, hashtag F2BQ. Hashtag F2BQ in TweetDeck. You need to have TweetDeck, by the way. If you don't have TweetDeck, you don't get to hang out in the sandbox. You don't get it. TweetDeck, you don't have to reload. You don't have to hit notifications. You don't have to do anything. It fires off automatically. It's made by Twitter. It's a free download. You can pop it right into the way that I use it. I use it directly in Chrome. So it just runs, and it's cool. And then I also leave Twitter running on the other side. And I do that, and I let that sit by itself so that way I can see how many notifications I get throughout the evening. That's what I do. All right, everybody's over at Spreaker. Last night, Spreaker, that chat room last night, over 1,100 postings. No joke. I want to say congratulations to Eric James, Beth DeLapp, Status Unknown, Chuck Rao, and Scott Hunt. You are all going to Contact in the Desert. Tomorrow night, we're going to crack out another 5 winners. Go to jimmychurchradio.com right now. Click on the contest page. Get over to Contact in the Desert. Get into the party. Tomorrow night, 5 more winners. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. When I come back after the break, all the news that you know nothing about. Maybe you know a little. I'm your humble host, Jimmy Church. It's Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network. I'll be back right after this. Don't forget, Nick Pope tonight at the bottom of the hour.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at jimmychurchradio.com.
Man, I ran out of time. I tried to get over to the Spreaker chat room. I'll get in there in a second. Come say hello. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Nick Pope will be joining us. Always a good show with Nick. Don't forget to go enter the Contact in the Desert contest. You need to do it. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Enter CITD. Tomorrow night, drawing 5 more names. You want to go. I'm telling you. The reason why you want to go, aside from the broadcast, and you're going to be able to see the show broadcast live and meet all of the researchers and authors that you love. Well, they'll all be there. Come hang out after the broadcast. You're going to be hanging out. But all those contest winners, and I'm telling you right now, Whoa is cringing every time that I say this, but dinner is on us. We're going to go party. Okay, that's why you want to go. You want to come hang out. You want to be part of those photographs. You do. You want to be there. And I'm just telling you right now, if you've ever seen my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, I don't play. Okay? I don't play. Ask any Fade or Not that was at Contact in the Desert last year, and they'll tell you. Ask Space Boy. Space Boy took 2 days to get out of bed after we were done with him on Friday night, and we got photographs to prove it. Somebody post that Space Boy pic. Whoa. Post that Space Boy pic. All right. All the news that you know nothing about. Today, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Mark Lippert, was attacked in Seoul. I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but they're dramatic. Possibly by more than one person, according to U.S. government sources in the U.S. and South Korea. He was in stable condition, according to the U.S. Embassy spokesperson. Lippert was injured by a razor blade. His injuries are not life-threatening, according to Marie Harf, a State Department spokesman, but he received injuries on his right cheek and hand. According to South Korea's YTN news channel, Lippert was about to deliver a speech at a breakfast being held at Sejong Hall in Seoul. The report says nothing specific about the attack, only that yelling was heard, and then the bloodied ambassador was taken to the hospital. The YTN report also says the suspect was identified by his last name, Kim, and was detained. The suspect was believed to be in his 50s. Unbelievable. Dramatic pictures, man. Blood everywhere. Razor blade. Nasty. All right. Lippert, by the way, I did a little background stuff. He was a confidant of Barack Obama ever since he arrived in the Senate in 2005. Lippert worked with Obama on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and traveled the world with the senator as he garnered the foreign policy experience that helped him pave the way for his presidential campaign. When Obama declared he would run for president in 2008, Lippert was by his side again, who was on the road with Obama and served as chief foreign policy advisor for the Obama campaign. In 2007, Lippert was deployed as a Naval Reserve lieutenant to Iraq for work as an intelligence officer with Navy SEALs. Lippert, man, sliced, brutal. Man, what's the world coming to? I didn't even want to say that, but seriously. A 17-year-old Virginia student has been charged with helping recruit for ISIS. Federal law enforcement officials said today the teen, whose name was not disclosed, was taken into custody last week. Prosecutors are seeking to charge him as an adult, but currently have charged him as a juvenile. One of the law enforcement officials said. They went on to say the case remains under seal. The teen, who lives in Virginia, suburb of Washington, is accused of helping a slightly older adult travel to Syria. The adult is believed to have joined ISIS there. The teen also is accused of distributing ISIS messages to a network of contacts. The jury is still out on the cause of Siberia's craters, says Carolyn Ruppel, chief of the U.S. Geological Survey's Gas Hydrates Project. But she and other scientists say that the new satellite mapping suggests another explanation that has to do with the rapid melting of ice cores called pingos. P-I-N-G-O-S, pingos. A pingo is a plug of ice that forms near the surface over time and has a small mound or top like a hill. It's like a hill. When an ice plug melts rapidly, as many have been, thanks to unseasonably warm temperatures in Siberia over the past year, it can cause part of the ground to collapse, forming a crater. But that process alone isn't enough to explain the ejected rocks that have been found around the rim of the craters, which, that suggests some sort of explosion. That's what my eyes tell me. Instead, Ruppel theorizes that the craters were formed by a sudden release of natural gas that had been stored in the permafrost but was kept under pressure by the weight of the pingo. This theory is bolstered by Russian satellite data, which show the pingos as they appear, small mounds, in the exact positions where the craters are formed. Interesting. Hollow Earth theory kind of went out the window. Archaeologists working in Nazareth, Jesus' hometown, in modern-day Israel, have identified a house dating to the 1st century that was regarded as the place where Jesus was brought up by Mary and Joseph. The house is partly made of mortar and stone walls and was cut into a rocky hillside. It was first uncovered in the 1880s by nuns of the Sisters of Nazareth convent, but it wasn't until 2006 that archaeologists led by Ken Dark, a professor at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom, dated the house to the 1st century and identified it as the place where people who lived centuries after Jesus' time believed Jesus was brought up there. Very interesting. More on this coming, by the way. Over the past few months, it's one of the craziest stories I've heard in a long time. Over the past few months, the town of Kalachi in Kazakhstan has suffered yet another round of the mystery illness that causes its villagers to fall asleep for no apparent reason. The problem was first reported in 2010, and government officials, perhaps spurred on by a recent burst of international attention, as well as the scale of the latest flare-up, have finally upped their efforts to get to the root of the bizarre plague. At least 2 other towns nearby have reported similar symptoms from their residents. Lead doctors now claim that they may have discovered the source of the epidemic, but their findings seem weak by toxicology standards and are far from conclusive closures for the locals. With a lack of a real cure, local authorities have just started evacuating Kalachi en masse, hoping that getting people out of town will just eliminate the illness wholesale. Now listen. As of the last outbreak from August to September of 2014, last year, about 60 people, which is 10% of Kalachi's population, had fallen asleep for days on end. A sudden wave in late December, 3 months ago, added over 30 more victims, including one non-local who was a visiting Russian retiree. By the end of January this year, the overall number of victims had reached 126, doubling the affliction's toll to 20% of the total population of Kalachi. It's insane. People are dropping off asleep in the middle of the day and not waking up for 3, 4, 5 days at a time. It's also been reported that a cat now, a house cat, is doing the same thing, sleeping for 3 days at a pop, and they can't wake up. NASA's Dawn spacecraft will begin orbiting the planet Ceres this week, ending a deep space chase that lasted 2.5 years. Dawn is scheduled to reach Ceres, the largest body in the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, on Thursday night, tomorrow night, March 5th. The probe has been headed for Ceres since September 2012, when it departed Vesta, the asteroid belt's second biggest citizen. Dawn's Ceres arrival should be relatively low-key, though, because it's traveling really, really slow. Okay, it's got these special low-thrust ion engines, sounds like Star Trek, and is approaching the dwarf planet like at a snail's pace. But tomorrow night it arrives, and we're going to find out. What did Linda Moulton Howe said last night? It's the size of Texas. If you took Texas and wrapped it into a ball, that's how big it is. So the 2 spots, I guess it's not Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's Dallas, Fort Worth. Bump, bump. Elon Musk, his radical plan to let people travel at 760 miles per hour in tubes will be tested in California next year. That's right. His Hyperloop was dismissed as a pipe dream. I didn't even want to report on it, but now it's getting off the ground. The billionaire's plans to shoot capsules of passengers along a tube at around the speed of sound may launch next year. Hyperloop's transportation technologies have secured land for the first full-scale Hyperloop with a 2016 launch in the California town of Quay Valley. Inside the tubes, check this out. Now, wrap your head around this. Hyperloop pods are mounted on thin skis made out of Iconel, an alloy already used by Musk, his SpaceX spacecraft. Air is pumped into the skis via small holes to make an air cushion. Each pod has air inlets at the front. An electric turbo compressor compresses air from the nose and routes it to the skis and into the cabin. Magnets on the skis plus an electromagnetic pulse give the pod its initial thrust. Reboosting motors along the route would keep the pod moving at just below the speed of sound so the system does not produce sonic booms. Sign me up. That's all I have got to say. 760 miles an hour. Would you do it? Would you do it? Of Quay Valley, man, is calling. This is Fade to Black. All the news you know nothing about. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Bespoke radio for the masses. When I come back after the break, Nick Pope will be joining us. Go get in the Contact in the Desert contest. JimmyChurchRadio.com. Click, enter. Maybe I'll call your name tomorrow. Fade or night. I'll be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Rex Dominguez, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Jimmy is your preacher.
Amen. This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier, and this is Ari Gold. We're of the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
KJCR.
JimmyChurchRadio.com. Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network. Monday, March 9th, our first syndication, KGRA. Landing out there, man. Richard Dolan, Chase, Mac Maloney, Micah Hanks. Oh, man. Jamie Havicon. Oh, it's going to be awesome. All right, I am ready. Let's get the show cracking. Nick Pope, he's here. He's with us. He's in the batter's box. Nick Pope is an author, journalist, a TV personality. He used to run the British government's UFO project at the Ministry of Defense. Initially skeptical, his research and investigation into the UFO phenomenon and access to classified government files on the subject soon convinced him that the phenomenon raised important defense and national security issues, especially when the witnesses were military pilots. Where the UFOs, my microphone's shorting out, where UFOs were tracked on radar. While working on the MOD's UFO project, Nick Pope also looked into alien abductions, crop circles, animal mutilations, remote viewing, and ghosts. He is now recognized as a leading authority on UFOs, the unexplained, and conspiracy theories. He does extensive media work, lectures all around the world, and has acted as a presenter, consultant, or contributor on numerous TV and radio shows just like this one. We would like to welcome back our good friend, Nick Pope. Nick, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm fine, thank you very much. It's great to be back on the show.
Hey, Nick, the last time that I saw you a couple of weeks ago, a couple of things. One, and I think I told you this later on in the day, I'm driving up Century Boulevard, pulling into the Hilton, and I'm on the phone with my agent at the time, right? So, who can hang up on him? But I'm driving, I'm in traffic, and you walk past me on the sidewalk, man. You're like in the middle of Los Angeles just walking down. What were you doing?
Well, I had just arrived at the Conscious Life Expo, and I think I was just taking a stroll, just trying to orientate myself as opposed to spending the entire conference at the hotel. So I just took a little stroll down the street to stretch my legs, and you went straight past me.
I so bad wanted to. Now, if I would have been on top of my game, I would have done that Jimmy Church. I would have pulled up, rolled down my window, said, "Hey, big guy, you need a ride?" I wanted so bad, but that street is heavily trafficked, and I couldn't whip a U-turn, but it was pretty weird. And my agent, Jeff, he's like, "Who's walking up the street?" And I'm looking in my rear view. I just drove past Nick Pope, man, all by himself in the middle of Los Angeles. It was too funny. So, and then I did want to say this. A couple of weeks ago, right before Conscious Life, I was strolling through documentaries, video on demand on my TV system at home. And I just popped this. It was like a crazy documentary. I didn't even know what it was about, but it had the word rocks or stones in it or monoliths. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll fall asleep to that. And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I turn on the documentary, and the first guy, and it's about rocks, the first guy that pops in the documentary is you. And I thought, what does Nick know about rocks? So what did I do? You kept me up for the next 2.5 hours till 3 o'clock in the morning. Do you remember making that documentary? Do you remember doing that?
Yes, I do. I think it was with a friend of mine from the UK who now actually lives in Turkey, Andy Goff, and he does a lot of media work. And I think this was a project of his. And I think I was just talking about the kind of sacred significance that stones have had throughout human history, and talking about religion and worship and sacred items. That's my recollection. But as you know, I do a lot of TV, and
Sure.
Sometimes these things blur into one. But I think I had good fun on that one.
You did, and you made rocks interesting, man. I'm telling you, you kept me up for 2.5 hours. It actually turned out to be a great documentary, and it was just one of those random things I meant to fall asleep to and maybe learn something in my dreams. That's what, we all do that. But there you were, and you're always compelling, and you had me hooked, man, from the opening scene.
Okay, good to know. I had forgotten about that one, but yes, I think it's just called The Stone.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It was like a documentary. I read the description, and only a guy like me could find something like that so great. I loved it. It was truly 2 hours of rocks and monolithic structures around the world. It was pretty cool. So what have you been up to since I saw you last a couple of weeks ago? You went to Chile, right?
Yes. After we pretty much as soon as I was back from LA, when we both were at the Conscious Life Expo, I went down to Chile, and I think while a lot of other people in the field went to the UFO Congress in Phoenix,
right?
I went down to Santiago, and this was a long-standing commitment that I had, and I went down there, and I spent about 6 days in Chile, met a lot of very interesting people. We had coverage in some of the national newspapers, and indeed the Congress at which I spoke was actually featured on the main evening news program in Chile. So it was really helping to make this subject, if it wasn't already, center stage with the mainstream media down in Chile, and I was very happy to be a part of that. And actually, it was only my second trip to Chile. So I live in Arizona now for a lot of the year anyway, so I can always go there. But good to get the chance to go back to Chile. Very interesting country, very, very hospitable people, and a very interesting UFO Congress we had down there.
Anything to report? I have questions, but anything to report? Anything interesting that you came away with?
I think a lot of people just generally telling me about their stories and experiences of this. But why I think Chile is particularly interesting at the moment, and I can't claim any direct credit or involvement in this. I think this is more something that my friend and colleague Leslie Kane has been involved with. But the Chilean authorities have recently hooked up with the French authorities on a collaborative project to look seriously at the UFO issue. And in a time where a lot of countries are effectively getting out of their UFO programs and shutting down their investigative research projects, it's good to see that Chile and France are actually teaming up, taking this seriously, and it really is something of a serious scientific venture going on. The Chileans are interesting. They look at this primarily as a flight safety issue, and the organization down there that has the lead is not the Air Force. It is the Chilean equivalent of the FAA. And in the French government, again, contrary to the usual model of embedding a UFO project in the Air Force or the Ministry of Defense, it's actually treated as a scientific venture, and the French do this from within their National Space Center. So again, some interesting things going on.
Why do you think, I've asked Leslie this, what's your take on this, since you're like a dual citizen now, but certainly raised outside of the United States. Why do you think Chile and other countries like Chile don't have issues with putting disclosure at the front of a conversation?
I think here in America, the subject just has too much baggage. I think you've only got to cast your mind back, for example, to Denis Kucinich and what happened to his presidential campaign when he was thinking of running. And then it came out that he had seen a UFO at Shirley MacLaine's residence, and the media had such a field day with it that really that was the end of his candidacy. And there is a lot of baggage with this subject. There is the ridicule factor. The mainstream media for many years have mocked this. Things are changing. I do see some encouraging signs, and perhaps we can get into some of that. But I think still the subject, there's just too much history of ridicule and disbelief and poking fun at it.
Do you remember Denis Kucinich's face when he was confronted in that debate? He turned red. I felt bad for him. And at first I thought it was all good, but the audience started laughing. And you're right. That was a stumble right there. Do you remember seeing his face?
I do. And I mean, I think in politics, one can clearly get into the most aggressive of debating situations, and that's going to be fine. But once people start laughing at you, that's game over.
He I want to say he recovered the best he could. He put the political spin on his answer. You know, he did the dance and thought that he was going to recover, but they just had a field day with it. And I thought it was wrong. And what fed everybody else was the laughter from the audience. And I found that shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it is the most devastating thing to any politician is to be laughed at, to become a figure of fun. As I say, you can become a figure of hate. That's fine. It kind of goes with the territory. But once you're just the person that people laugh at, once you're the comedy value, the comedy candidate, you might as well just withdraw from the race.
Leslie, who I just love, when she was on with us, and she had presented us with a bunch of pictures of her down in Chile with a lot of guys in uniform, right? You know what I mean? Obviously, ranking members of the military down there. They get it. Could you imagine the same photograph with the Pentagon involved with a ufologist or a researcher here in the United States? It would never happen.
No, it wouldn't. I mean, I think one of the people that Leslie was pictured with was General Ricardo Bermudez, who heads up that particular part of the Chilean equivalent of the FAA. But you're right, I recall that photo. And yeah, it would be inconceivable here. I mean, there are a couple of interesting precedents. One time I went to a conference in San Marino, which was cleverly marketed as a conference that would look both at space from a serious scientific point of view. So there were all sorts of astronomers on the bill, but also it would look at the UFO subject. And because the Ministry of Tourism was involved in actually organizing this event, the Italian Air Force did send 2 people in uniform on duty to give a presentation about the Italian Air Force's interest and involvement in the UFO subject. So there are precedents. It can happen, but you're absolutely right. It's very difficult at this point in time to see that happening in the United States or indeed in the United Kingdom.
We have so many things that we need to talk about tonight, and I'm going to try to get them all in. But before we do that, and John Burroughs is such a big subject right now, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to ask you a couple of personal questions. First, and I don't think I've ever asked you this before. Have you ever had a sighting?
I've not. Sad to say, I've investigated, I suppose, hundreds of sightings and other anomalies for the Ministry of Defense, and maybe thousands if you look at the cases that I looked at subsequent to that in a personal capacity, but I never once had a sighting or an unusual experience myself. But who knows?
Would it
one day, maybe.
Would it change your outlook?
I think that's almost impossible to answer. I think it's unknowable in a sense. I suppose I see it as something of an advantage not having ever seen a UFO, because in a sense, when I come to this subject, I come to it in an even-handed and dispassionate way, and I suspect that if I'd seen one myself, maybe I would have some sort of emotional baggage to bring to the table. So in a sense, I suppose it's a good job that I haven't. But of course, from a sort of intellectual curiosity point of view, it would be fascinating. I mean, of course, I suspect that unless I saw something really up close and personal, I would just, with my government hat on, sort of say, well, it's probably just some secret prototype spy plane or drone. So I think it would have to be something pretty spectacular to make me think it was anything other than that.
Right. Well, okay, leaving your MOD side of you, let's put that aside. What do you think we're being visited right now today?
I don't know.
Do you think we've been visited in the past?
Again, I don't know. I'm not a fan, I have to say, of the ancient aliens hypothesis. I think that when we get into discussions about primitive belief and superstition, it's very difficult. We really can't know how these people really thought, what their belief systems were, even what their thought processes were. So to try and extrapolate and go beyond that, I don't know. I think the other point about the ancient aliens theory, and I know I'm never very popular when I say this, but it's somehow disparaging to the human experience and achievement. I mean, when we look at ancient civilizations, when we look at whether it's the Egyptians, whether it's the Mayans, whoever it is, we actually find people who did have, particularly I'm thinking of the Egyptians, considerable knowledge of areas such as mathematics, geometry, astronomy, engineering, and then to disparage their achievements and say, well, they didn't build the pyramids, aliens must have done it for them, or at least given them a heavy assist, is I think, at the best case, a little bit insulting, but at the worst takes us onto a slippery slope where we start disparaging perhaps the very best of human achievement and knowledge.
Sure. The only, and you're absolutely right. If you take the Orthodox historian or the Orthodox archaeologist point of view, that is a strong. I understand that you don't want to take away from human achievement. I totally get that. But the black and white part of it that I find a hard time chewing and swallowing is when you look at 3500 BC and when the rest of the world, I say this all the time on this show, when the rest of the world is running around in animal skins, suddenly these guys can clear out 13 acres of bedrock and build something of that weight, pointing to due north with geometry and measurements that we would have a hard time doing today with modern technology. And suddenly they just spring up with this knowledge at 3500 BC. And I don't even think the pyramids were built at 3500 BC. I think they were already there when Upper and Lower Egypt came together. The pyramids are already there. But putting that aside, at 3500 BC, the rest of the world is foraging, for seeds in the ground, trying to eat and survive every day. and the Egyptians suddenly have this extraordinary knowledge of architecture and geometry and math and farming and government. All of it just popped up at the same time. Forget about the wheel. All of this math and accounting systems. It boggles the mind that just one day they didn't do it, and the very next day they're building the pyramids, and that's what archaeology wants us to accept. I don't want to take away from that, Nick, and I don't want to try to change your mind or prejudice you. I'm just saying when you look at it like that in those terms, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I am happy to be persuaded otherwise, of course. I mean, I try to keep an open mind on this, but I mean, human history doesn't necessarily kind of unfold in an altogether linear, progressive way. I mean, arguably the Roman Empire, for example, in around about 100 AD, was probably far more advanced than anything else on the face of the planet until the Renaissance. So empires rise and fall, and it's not necessarily a straight line progression that you start dumb and get smarter. I mean, I think there are peaks and troughs, and undeniably the pharaonic Egypt was a huge peak of human achievement. But having said that, it's not my specialist field, and like I say, I'm happy if the evidence leads me elsewhere. I'm happy to change my mind. But I mean, that was a very long way of answering your fairly short question. I mean, I don't know. Well, I don't know was my basic answer.
We'll go out a contact in the desert, and you and I will spend an evening together, and then the next day you'll be a new man.
Well, hey, maybe we'll go on a skywatch and see something.
You know what? Now, see, this is the thing. Let me tell you a couple of sightings. Well, that I've had three. I've had three real, genuine, unexplainable sightings. One of them, I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I had a film camera in my hand, and I grabbed a pic. I will take that pic to contact in the desert, and I'll show it to you. It doesn't show much, just a little dot in some clouds. But it is what I saw, and then when you look at it with a jeweler's loop, and you magnify it, you can see that it's a pyramid in the sky. I don't know, 60,000 feet, some crazy height. But that was one. But the other one that I saw that I found to be probably the most interesting was my wife and I were here in the valley, here in Burbank, and we're coming down out of the mountains on Latuna Canyon Road into the valley. And if you know the valley, you know that this is a big canyon road coming down out of the mountains, and you're elevated. And in front of you can see the whole valley lit up, right, the lights. And it's 10:30 at night, 10:24. We're coming down the hill. We're heading into the valley. And we have the sunroof open. And my wife, Rita, yells. I can't say exactly what she said because this is a family show. But she said, "What the bleep is that?" And I look at her, and she's looking up through the sunroof. So I look in the direction where she is looking. I'm driving the car, and this ball, and I'm going to guess that it was maybe from the distance, I don't know, 50 to 100 feet across. It was a big ball. Came down out of the sky, straight down from 12 o'clock position to 6 o'clock, straight down through the center of the windshield of the car. And it came down into the city of Van Nuys. And the total time of this was about a second. Okay, about 1 second. So it went from the sunroof. Imagine looking up out of the sunroof, right? And seeing this thing come straight down through the windshield, through the hood of my car, right? So that's, just draw a straight line. That's exactly what it did. But it came down into downtown Van Nuys, and I expected a huge explosion. That's what my mind was prepared for. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. No explosion, no nothing, and it was a white ball. That's all and it didn't even have a streak behind it. No flames or nothing like that. It was just a white ball, just boom. And I immediately get on the phone, and I called Wolf McCarran over at MUFON, and I said, dude, did you see that? You know, I need to report this. And I looked down at my clock in the car. It said 10:24. At 10:24, a light came down into downtown Van Nuys. And he calls me back and he says, man, there's nothing on the MUFON website. There's no reports. I said, there's millions of people that live here. How can nobody see it? It was huge, and it just landed in downtown Van Nuys, and there was no explosion. Well, we went home. There was nothing on the news. Nothing. I checked the web all the way till the morning the next day, looking at LA Times, everything that I could do, all the media outlets. There wasn't one single report about this. Now, how is that possible? Now, I ask you, Nick, if you would have seen something like that. I'm not saying it was this or that. I'm just telling you what I saw. That's all. That's just what we saw. And that's a mind-changing, life-changing event when you know what you saw. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, absolutely. And that, of course, is why James Fox, I guess, called one of his documentaries, I Know What I Saw, because you hear this phrase again and again with people. And that is why I totally accept that I can't have the same perspective on this as a witness would have. And I think if and when I ever do see something myself, clearly, self-evidently, it would change my perception of all this. I still think that for somebody who comes at this from the background of having investigated it for the government and now commentates on it in the mainstream media, it's maybe an advantage that I haven't had a sighting, but of course, that could change any day or any night.
How did you get your job over at MOD? How did that happen?
Well, I'd joined the Ministry of Defense in 1985, and they move you around every few years. And during the first Gulf War, I had been working in the Air Force Operations Room down in the Joint Operations Center, essentially as a watchkeeper and a briefer. And I was working to a particular boss. He knew that I was looking for a move, and I was due for a move. As I say, at the time, the career progression was that every 2, 3, 4 years, either on level transfer or promotion, you would move. And he said, I hear you're looking for a new job. I've got a vacancy coming up after all this is over, i.e. the Persian Gulf War. Are you interested in the job? And I said, sure, what is it? And he said, UFOs. And I gave him a sort of quizzical look, and he's like, did I hear that correctly? But I did, and that's how I kind of fell into it, almost by accident. There has been that job. That job at the Ministry of Defense had existed since 1953. Over the years, it had been embedded in various different divisions, sometimes Air Force, sometimes civilian Ministry of Defense employees, and I was a civilian. So other people had done that job before me. Other people have done it since. But from 1991 through to 1994, that was my job. Now, I did plenty of other things in my 21 years in the Ministry of Defense, but obviously that was the one for which I'm best known.
What was the interview like? You know, you go in, you sit down, and you're going to talk ufology, apparently. How did that go, and what was it like?
You know, I'm embarrassed to say I really can't recollect many of the details, but because it was a level transfer move and not a promotion, I don't think there was a formal interview, as there would have been involving three people of a more senior rank with a representative from the personnel department. As far as I can recollect, this being a level transfer move, it was simply an informal discussion with my soon-to-be line manager and myself, where he set out a little bit about the job. I said a bit about my career history. But bear in mind, as I said at the beginning of this particular part of the interview, we actually knew each other anyway because we were working alongside each other in the Joint Operations Center. So in a sense, I think we both figured out that we worked fairly well together. So there probably wasn't that much to say except, do you want the job? And I obviously said, yes, I do.
Did you meet your predecessor?
Yes. The way that happens is that you shadow them for a while. So what happens is that your first week, your predecessor is still there. So you sit alongside them. They handle the meetings, take the calls, do the correspondence, and you literally sit alongside them and watch and learn and discuss as things go along. And gradually in the course of the week, you take on more and more until on the last day, it's over to you. It's as simple as that.
And what was the conversation like with him, or was it him or her? Him?
It was a him.
It was a him.
And he said, well, words to the effect of, this is a fascinating job. There's some really interesting stuff, and there's some pretty far out crazy stuff. And good luck steering a path through it.
Oh, man.
You know what? That was pretty smart advice, because I think that applied not just to the job that I did, but arguably to the whole field.
I'm sort of picturing Patrick McGowan in The Prisoner. You know, that's kind of the vision that I have here with this. You know, the secrecy and the compartmentalization and the need to know. I can see all of that. Plus, you have that MOD mystique that is built into it. And I don't know why I'm seeing The Prisoner here, but I am in my own mind. Did you immediately do what I would have done? Did you start pulling out files and try to find stuff that maybe you shouldn't read? Were you poking around? No, I think the golden rule in that sort of situation, and it applies to most defense jobs, is you start off with a very light hand on the tiller, and you don't make waves, you don't rock the boat, you take over the job, you just very carefully find your own feet, and only after you've well and truly acclimatized do you perhaps start asking harder questions and diving a little bit deeper. But to start off with, you absolutely just learn the ropes and pretty much run things as they've been run. I think continuity is the watchword in that sort of situation. And I mean, you're right, just the comments that you made beforehand. I mean, although we joke about The Prisoner, it's certainly true that the Ministry of Defense is an inherently secretive organization. And bear in mind that actually at the time, we in the UK did not even have yet on the statute books a Freedom of Information Act. So the default position was certainly say nothing to the media or the public, other than trotting out the very blandest of standard lines, whether it's on UFOs or any subject. Now, what did your business card say?
It didn't. I didn't have one at the time.
No,
because
stop. You didn't have a business card?
No.
What about your letterhead? You had stationery. What?
Yes. Yes.
Did it say UFO guy? What
no, it didn't. It said Secretariat Air Staff 2A. A typical Ministry of Defense bureaucratic mumbo jumbo. Doesn't really tell you much about anything. And that, of course, was the point.
That's not romantic, though.
It's not. But, you know, the funny thing is people kind of get hung up sometimes on should we be referring to this Ministry of Defense effort as the UFO project, the UFO desk. Us Brits never gave it a name. So unlike in America, where I could simply have said I worked on Project Blue Book, and our work was modeled fairly closely on that, right down to using the same forms, for example. But we never kind of gave the thing a formal project name. So we use all these, we could use the name of the division in which this particular work stream was embedded, as I say, Secretariat Air Staff.
Right.
You could say as a sort of generic shorthand, UFO project, UFO desk, but we never had a project name. I think we should have done, looking back. But that was just very much the low-key, understated way that us Brits sometimes do things.
How did your other MOD guys that you hung out with, how did they look back at you having that position? And you know where I'm going with that. I just want to know what the general attitude was around the office, one. And two, like in the cafeteria, I mean, could you sit at the other top secret guys' tables, or were you the UFO guy? You know, how did they regard that desk?
Well, I was always known, certainly when I was doing the job, as the guy doing the X-Files job. And yes, very much did happen that almost the time at which I was doing that job was the time when the TV series, the X-Files, was rising in popularity and first getting shown on the UK. So yeah, the UK TV. So yes, very much did have that kind of banter, as it were, going on in the canteen. And of course, a number of people were hugely interested in trying to sit next to me and, come on then, Nick, you know, what's going on? Is there anything to this or not?
Well, that's my next question. Did that happen?
Yes, it did. But obviously, the need to know principle applies right across the board, even with colleagues who you knew shared a top secret clearance. You wouldn't really dream of starting to discuss official business outside of the need to know. And you would have been in trouble if you started to do so, whether we're talking UFOs, whether we're talking the latest design of warship, whether we're talking operational matters, be they Iraq, Afghanistan, or whatever.
With I'm going to ask you about your exit interview too, as well. So don't let that thought escape me. With putting Rendlesham aside, putting Woodbridge aside, what was the one case at the MOD that you still don't have answers on, that you're convinced that something was going on?
Well, we had something that's generically known as the Cosford incident, and it's perhaps not as widely known as it should be. It's probably the UK's second best known case, certainly second most significant after Rendlesham Forest. Interesting, it has just been featured on a couple of new TV shows, UFOs Declassified and Season 2 of Close Encounters, both actually shows out of Canada. But this case was March 30th and March 31st, 1993, so it was right in the middle of my tour of duty. And it was a wave of sightings that took place over a series of a period of time, around about 6 hours, I think, from start to finish. And a number of police and military witnesses, 2 Air Force bases directly overflown by this object, whatever it was. Very standard description in a way, huge, flat, triangular-shaped craft, 3 lights in each corner, one larger and slightly dimmer light dead in the center on the underside of this thing. And one of the military witnesses, when I interviewed him the day after this, he said to me that this thing flew maybe 200 feet above the base, very slow, fired a narrow beam of light down at the ground. The light beam then retracted. He said there was a low-frequency humming sound coming from this craft, a very unpleasant sound that he could feel reverberating through his body, as well as hear the sound this thing made. And then suddenly, from this very slow speed, maybe no more than 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, he said the thing accelerated away to the horizon, orders of magnitude, speed-wise, beyond a fast jet. And this was a man with 8 years' experience in the Air Force.
What was his first name?
I don't think I had better name him, because although I've seen it out there.
I only ask because he contacted me and we talked about it.
Oh, right.
And that's why I'm asking his first name. But yeah, his description to me was chilling. And
yes, I think 1 or 2 people in the UFO community have tried to kind of use him as a little bit of a political football, so to speak. He's, I think, a little bit wary about any of this. But I mean, I was the one who interviewed him the morning after, and if you have spoken to him too, you'll know what I mean. And apologies to listeners who are probably thinking this is all a bit cryptic, but clearly, when you're talking about Air Force witnesses who are in the service at the time, these people have to think very carefully before speaking out on this. And even now, there are sensitivities involved with this sort of subject.
Yeah, the low frequency description and how he described it to me, and to you too as well, was something that bothered him, and he made that a point to drive home. It was the sound that it made, wow. And again, not to stay cryptic on this, and I understand the sensitivity of it, but it affected me. His story affected me.
Yes, I mean, I can recall it very, very clearly. His voice was almost shaking with emotion, and bear in mind, I don't know when you spoke to him, but I spoke to him probably just maybe I don't know 4, 5, 6 hours after all this. So it was still something that he was going through, trying to process.
So tell me about your exit interview. Was it like number 6?
Well, now, do you mean exit from the UFO project or from the entire Ministry of Defense, which was later?
From the entire Ministry of Defense, because everything falls under one umbrella when you do that exit interview.
Sure. As I recall, I had obviously for some months at the rank that I had reached at the time, you can't just leave. You have to give, I think it was at least 6 months notice, if not more. And I'd made a promise to stay until my successor had been recruited and was in post. And at the time, this was nothing to do with UFOs. We're talking 2006. I was in the Directorate of Defense Security, and I had been, due to illness, I had been one of 4 or 5 acting deputy directors. Defense security used to be something of a backwater, but post 9/11, self-evidently, security was very much at the forefront of absolutely everything. And their security was split into a number of different areas: physical security, counterterrorism, personnel security, IT security, vetting. And I had responsibility for military policing, actually, amongst other things. But being in security, it was a fairly high profile and important area. And my last day, I think I had an interview where I was formally, I can't even recollect what the phrase was, signed off or read off a number of security clearances that I had, one by one, as you sign off that you no longer have a need to know this information, and and the very final thing is that you sign the Official Secrets Act reminder. You sign it on your first day in service and your last. And when you sign it on your last day, it simply reminds you that the fact that you're leaving is irrelevant. This binds you for life, and you are absolutely not in any way entitled to divulge any classified information unless you have authorization, unless the information has been declassified. And that security oath, your secrecy oath, it binds you till the day you die. So yeah, I signed off.
Yeah, does it scare the crap out of you when you sign that?
Well, it's meant to. It's meant to.
Exactly.
I mean, people
intimidating.
Yes. I mean, I think because I was in security myself, I was well aware of the procedures and the penalties that would apply. But yeah, it's supposed to scare you. And if you break the Official Secrets Act, if you divulge classified information, you will get a knock on the door. And if you are convicted, you likely will go to jail.
Well, let's
sometimes for a very long time, of course.
Let's see if we can get them to knock on the door tonight. What do you say? Let's give it a...
let's take a rain check on that.
Let's give it a shot. I'm going to try. Do you think they're listening to you right now on this show?
I doubt it. I doubt it. I think maybe when I first started discussing this in public, people were monitoring, but I think that the point was that I became almost an official spokesperson for the ongoing campaign to declassify and release the Ministry of Defense UFO files. So it was, I know some people think I'm still secretly working for them, but in that sense, I suppose, when you see me on the BBC talking about the latest batch of MOD UFO files being released, I suppose in a sense I am still working for them. But I think it's very clear doing that sort of interview that I know where the line is.
Are you still working for them?
No.
What about the scuttlebutt that's out there about Nick Pope being a disinfo guy? You hear it every single day. I know that you do. How do you address that directly?
Well, in a sense, I can't. I mean, I can't run away from my past. I think everyone knows it's an open secret that I worked where I worked for 21 years. I can't change that. I can't hide it. There's no getting away from it. So really, if people want to believe that I'm still secretly working for the government, that everything I say and do is part of some spooky, sinister disinformation campaign, probably nothing I can say to the contrary is going to dissuade them of that view. So in a sense, why should I bother?
Say sinister again. Just say it. Say
sinister.
It. Man. Oh, man. Just that accent alone makes you disinfo guy. I'm just telling you right now.
BBC English.
Yeah, right. This came up earlier tonight. Where's the accent from? Where were you born?
In London. So I was born in London, brought up in the southeast in the county of Surrey. So I joke about BBC English, but I think that's probably what people would say if they were characterizing my accent.
Let's change gears a little bit. We're still staying on target here. The MOD came out as you were the unofficial spokesman for the release of everything, right? Everything. And the last time that you were on this show, I don't think we talked about it after that, but was when all of that stuff was coming out. And you had told me then on the show, Jimmy, that's it. There's nothing else. I'm telling you, there's nothing else. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case today, does it?
No, that's right. The Ministry of Defense got caught, not in a lie, I don't think so, but caught certainly in an embarrassing situation. And interestingly, it was John Burroughs who played a major part in this. And I'm sure we'll come on to that without wanting to repeat, I think, an interview you had with Linda Moulton Howe about recent developments. But yes, the Ministry of Defense, when the UK got its Freedom of Information Act, it was soon clear that the MOD was getting more requests from journalists, from the public, about UFOs than any other subject. So decided to proactively release all this material to the National Archives. And it was an interesting situation because for years the ministry had downplayed the true extent of its interest and involvement in this subject, sort of almost implied that, well, we don't really investigate in depth, we just glance at these reports to see if there's anything of any defense interest. And then when they actually had to release this, it transpired there were around 60,000 pages of documents, some of which were at levels of classification up to and including secret UK eyes only. It's just one down from top secret. So that was embarrassing.
Okay, I'm going to let you continue. I just want to ask you, did you have access to the very top secret documents? You could read anything that you needed to put your hands on?
I had the security clearance and the need to know. So, yes, that's not to say that if I'd gone to a section dealing with Army pensions and asked for even some low-grade information about Army pensions, they would have quite rightly told me no, because I would have had no need to know. But on the UFO phenomenon and related issues, then absolutely I had that combination of security clearance and need to know. So I'm convinced I saw everything, though of course I accept from an almost philosophical and point of logic that I can't prove a negative. I mean, I can never prove that there wasn't some, I don't know, document that I never got to see, or some super secret level even above mine.
Of course.
So, but to the best of my knowledge and ability, I've seen everything. And indeed, when some of them quite highly classified documents started coming out, of course, I recognized them. Some of them I'd seen before, some of them I had written myself. So, of course, I was at the heart of this, and the ministry released the first batch of files in May 2008, and what was billed as the final batch in the summer of 2013. But yes, last year, as a result of Freedom of Information Act requests put in by John Burroughs, somewhat embarrassingly, the Ministry of Defense had to turn around and say, well, we told you that was it, but actually we found 18 more files. Now, those files should by now be with the National Archives, and certainly when this was looked at last year, my understanding is that the Ministry of Defense was aiming to get them to the National Archives by December 2014. The National Archives would take about 9 months to prepare them for release. So September of this year, we can perhaps expect to see those files. But of course, yes, it's hugely embarrassing for the Ministry of Defense to have told the world that absolutely we have released everything, and then find, oh no, here's 18 files that for whatever reason we forgot about.
Well, here's the $1 million question. These 18 files, have you seen them before? And when they released everything else up until the summer of 2013, did you notice that something was missing?
I think I've seen most of the material, if not all. Some material is missing, yes, absolutely. If you look at what's come out already, you'll see that some of the material has been redacted, and those redactions are in line with the exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act set out on the UK Ministry of Justice website, and they cover all the sorts of things you'd expect. A lot of it's quite mundane, just names and addresses of witnesses on UFO reports, but it does get in with some of the more highly classified material to areas, exemptions covering things such as defense, national security, intelligence, and so forth. So, yes, I've seen this material. I think the question that I often get asked is there going to be a smoking gun in any of this material and in these 18 files that are coming out later this year? No, there isn't. There's going to be no single document that sort of proves this is real and provides people with a definitive explanation of the UFO mystery. So don't expect that, but do expect some interesting cases, some interesting internal policy documents, and I think something which will, whatever you believe about UFOs, be of interest and importance.
The last time that you were on with us, or maybe it was the time before, but when we were talking about the release of the documents, and you had said at that time, that's it, Jimmy, there is no more. I've seen it all. It's here. Well, we have 18 more files. Are you confident that this is it? Or now are you even second guessing the MOD and there's stuff that they are definitely 100% holding back for whatever reason?
Well, there's definitely material that will continue to be held back. I think the formally classified intelligence study, colloquially known as Project Condign, is a very good case in point, and that's a document where small but very important parts of it are still blacked out, and so far as I'm aware will continue to be blacked out. And perhaps that's something Linda discussed. Of course, Project Condign was instrumental in John Burroughs getting his settlement from the Department of Veterans Affairs, but again, perhaps we'll come on to that. So some things, such as parts of Project Condign, will, I'm sure, continue to be withheld. And if you asked me to speculate, I would say that these 18 files aren't going to be necessarily the end of the story. The Ministry of Defense is a huge organization, and the UFO project dates back to 1953. Are there some other files tucked away in an obscure combination box or locked filing cabinet somewhere that have been forgotten about? Very possibly. That's how I know people sometimes find it difficult to believe, but that really is how government works sometimes.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt. Did you ever feel when you were working at the MOD that maybe you could have had a counterpart doing a job like yours in the MOD that you knew nothing about, that maybe you weren't the only guy?
Well, I certainly had colleagues in other parts of the ministry who looked at this. For example, I had a colleague who worked in what at the time I think was called Directorate of Air Defense, who was essentially a radar specialist. And he would certainly give expert advice to the UFO project on radar issues. I had a colleague in the Defense Intelligence Staff who again provided a scientific and technical intelligence input into our work on this. But these figures weren't sort of hidden away. They weren't people I didn't know about. These were people who I liaised with on an almost daily basis. And really we were a small project, but we could bring in the outside expertise when we needed to. So we packed, I think, a big punch. But no, I never felt there was a kind of shadow project hidden away somewhere. In a sense, how could there have been? Because they would have needed access to the raw data. Well, and that was coming often. Of course, we talk about the raw data. Most of the raw data, I mean, some would come from pilots and military personnel and from the radar tapes themselves, but 80-90% of the raw data, of course, came from the public. And I was the one getting that. So it's difficult to see how some secret shadow project could have operated.
You and John have been working, really closely together. Your book was released in paperback yesterday. Congratulations on that. I'm assuming all of that information on the book is and how to get it is at your website or Amazon.
Yes, it's nickpope.net, and of course it's all over Amazon. Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, and yes, it came out in trade paperback, as you say, just yesterday. I co-wrote it with John Burroughs and Jim Penniston, both, of course, original United States Air Force witnesses to this, and really at the heart of the incident.
With the press release that John did independently and through Linda, and I helped distribute it myself too. I was more than happy to do that. When I read through it, I was happy for John. First off, let's just go there. I was happy for John, and I felt like it was about as close as we could get to an admission of something that until this day, it's about as close as we have gotten. But I also felt like it fell a little bit short too, as well. How did you feel the first time that you had read it?
Well, I totally understand why John and his attorney, Pat Frascogna, did it that way. And I think, in a sense, it was the only way they could do it. I take the point. I mean, John has sometimes used the phrase, talking about this VA settlement, that this is not disclosure, this is confirmation. And perhaps I can just put a bit of flesh on the bones there, if I will.
Sure.
Without wanting to redo your interview with Linda, but as you and your listeners know, John has for many years believed that some of his health problems, and particularly heart problems, stem from the encounter in Rendlesham Forest. And for years, of course, the American government really didn't comment on UFOs, didn't really acknowledge that there was anything to this at all. And I think John was very much on a hiding to nothing with his claim. And then the British Ministry of Defence declassified and released Project Condign and the final report. And although parts of it, as I said a moment ago, are still blacked out, one bit that maybe by accident slipped past the censor's pen was something tucked away in Volume 2, Annex F to Working Paper 1.
Right.
And under the rather obscure heading of non-ionizing electromagnetic effects on humans, there was a little sentence, and it said, the well-reported Rendlesham Forest / Bentwaters event is an example where it might be postulated that several observers were probably exposed to UAP radiation for longer than normal UAP sighting periods. UAP, of course, is British government speak for UFO. It's unidentified aerial phenomena. So all of a sudden, John was able to go back to the VA and say, well, hey, wait a minute. Before you kind of accept the US government position on all this, have a look at this British government intelligence study on UFOs,
right,
which basically said, yeah, we were probably irradiated. And I think on the basis of that,
irradiated by a UFO.
Yes.
Yeah, let's be clear here.
Yes.
Continue.
Now, none of that, of course, tells us what it was. But the fact that John was able to point on the Ministry of Defence's own website, the provenance of this document, unlike, this isn't MJ12, which turned up in a mailbox somewhere. You can read this on the British government's website. And the fact that John was able to say, this is an intelligence study on UFOs, highly classified. This bit's been released, and hey, there it is. There it comes out and says, this is what probably happened to these people. And the VA settled. Is that disclosure in the sense that people like Steve Bassett mean it? My fellow Americans, people of the world, we are not alone. No, of course it's not. But it is confirmation of something. John Burroughs encountered something in Rendlesham Forest. He's got a highly classified document from the Ministry of Defense saying so. And on the basis of that, I don't use that phrase accidentally, whether it was deliberate or accidental. The British government painted the American government into a corner on this one. And the VA settled. Now, of course, people say, well, we want to see the medical file. Bear in mind that the VA is still refusing to release a lot of the medical file itself. Really, all we have is some paperwork about the claim. And I know that journalists who've written up this story, and just yesterday this broke in one of the UK's best-selling national daily newspapers, the Daily Mirror. Of course, the journalist has to satisfy him or herself that this is real. But I think it gets a bit cheeky when ufologists start kind of getting in touch with John via Facebook and saying, hey, can I have all your medical files? And John, quite rightly, I think, says, no, you can't. So this story is an interesting one.
But when in Condign, when something is directly stated about irradiation and UAP phenomena, there is data collected from somewhere, because they refer to it in a direct sense, like they knew exactly what the hell they were talking about. Where did that information come from? What did they extrapolate from to make such a bold statement as that, which was a report that was at the time classified? So they have UAP, UFO phenomenon information from somewhere. Where did that come from?
largely it came from the Ministry of Defense UFO files. I mean, this was a Ministry of Defense intelligence study, so self-evidently its primary source is our own UFO files, and I mentioned that those go back to 1953. Project Condign started off really as like a lot of intelligence studies. We knew we'd investigated UFOs on a case-by-case basis over a period of decades, but no one had really attempted to put it all together as a good intelligence study should do and say, well, look, what have we got here? What do we think? What are we dealing with? So a lot of it was about trend analysis, but one of the sources of that statement, of course, was Colonel Holt's memo itself. That contained, of course, the basic radiation levels that Munro Nevels, the disaster preparedness officer, took at the landing site, just hours after all this had gone down. But there was also an intelligence assessment by a part of the Defense Intelligence Staff called DI-52, and one of the original 1981 documents there certainly talked about the radioactivity levels as, and the quote was, significantly higher than the average background. But other parts of the ministry, other scientific and technical intelligence experts would have been brought in on this. So the primary source is the MOD UFO files themselves, but secondary sources will go wider than that.
Well, when they say something like that, and you left it off there, Nick, you left UAP off at the end of that sentence. If you know what I mean, normal levels, when you encounter a UAP, when you, I'm paraphrasing there, I don't have the direct quote in front of me, but when you make that kind of quote, the only way to read that, the way that my eyes read it, is that they're basing it on a previous event that is factual. It's coming from somewhere. I don't think it's hyperbole.
No, well, a lot of this will be open source material. I mean, I think it's a matter of public record that there have been other cases where it's certainly been suggested that people have been irradiated. The obvious one is the Cash Landrum incident, but maybe the Stephen Michalak case from, 1967. There are other ones. But I probably can't go into too many details, as I'm sure you'll understand, about methods and sources. So I can say that the primary source was obviously the Ministry of Defense UFO files, but there were other ones too.
Yeah.
And I mean, clearly, here's another point. And I think I can say this because this part has been declassified. But again, bear in mind, A, that this is an intelligence study, and B, that it does talk on occasion about the former Soviet Union. So, for example, one of the quotes where Project Condign's final report talks about weaponization, it goes on to say, there is evidence that scientists in the former Soviet Union have taken a particular interest in UFO phenomena. They've identified the close connection with plasma technologies and are pursuing related techniques for potential military purposes. And they go on to talk about very high-power energy generation, RF weapons, so directed energy weapons, for example. So, I mean, this is an area I can't go into much detail about, but the fact that it even covers what was going on in the former Soviet Union, and it is an intelligence study, I think you can read in between the lines of that statement.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I guess I'm trying to drive this point home, is that the verbiage of that, when you read it, it's factual. And it's a statement staying directly. It's not even beating around the bush, like you're saying, reading between the lines. It's saying that the Soviets have weaponized ET technology. That's what it says.
Certainly we're trying to.
Right. So where did? Yeah.
I should maybe correct one point. It doesn't say. It never comes out and says ET technology.
Right.
It just says UAP.
Right.
Whatever UAP turns out to be.
UFO.
Yes.
I'm just saying, I don't want you to get your pension all messed with or anything. I don't want you stepping out of bounds. But I know what I read, and when I read that, I was astounded. The first time that I read those lines, I read those with John Burroughs on the phone. The two of us were talking for hours on end one day, and talking about the significance of that statement. And my head was swimming. I was like, how could they put this in print unless they knew exactly the implications of this? Now, certainly they didn't. That should have been redacted, in my opinion. I'm glad that it wasn't, and I'm talking about the irradiation comments, and then the weaponization and plasma, and I think they even say balls at one point, don't they? Plasma balls.
Yes, they do. They sometimes use the quote plasma-related fields. They talk about plasma and magnetic fields to UAPs being an unexpected feature of this study. And they go on to talk about this marvelous phrase that you sometimes hear, various novel military applications. And again, that's a direct quote from the report. One of the interesting things, is that this was declassified in May of 2006, and it took a long time for the UFO community to even spot this quote about the Rendlesham Forest incident in there. But it was right there. It's a classic, it's a classic case. I know I've used this phrase before, but I think it makes the point very well. It's a classic case of the best place to hide a book is in a library.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what did you think? Okay, now, the first time that you had read Condign and these specific passages, do you think that they went too far, or do you think that it was just an accident and they were, again, speaking factually about knowledge?
Well, first of all, I should say that I was actually involved in some work in 1993 and 1994 that led a few years later to the setting up of Project Condign. So I was well aware that this was something we were trying to do. I am not, as has been, I think, suggested somewhere on the internet, I'm not the anonymous author of this final report. I had left before the study had been carried out. So I think it's important I should just deny that, because I've heard one or two people suggesting I wrote this thing. I didn't. I was aware of it. Did they go too far? I don't know. I think redacting information is always a difficult and fairly relative thing to do. I don't want to say too much about it, because I think I'm probably skirting around the edges of difficult, sensitive, and classified areas in all of this. But suffice to say, the person who redacted this will not necessarily have been the person who wrote this. And I was genuinely surprised that, for example, the statement on Rendlesham Forest was still in the final thing, that it didn't get blacked out. I was certainly surprised that the part about weaponization was still in there. Yes, in a sense, intellectually, I'm glad it's there, because it gives people a fuller understanding of what we were trying to do. And yes, I'm a great supporter, within reason, of open government and freedom of information. So I guess it's a good thing. But yes, I confess to being slightly surprised that one or two things in Condign did get released. I thought there would have been a bit more black pen in the final report than was in fact the case.
Well, because of who you are, everybody's going to turn to you and start asking these questions. It's that simple. They're going to come straight at you and go, aha, okay, well, it says this, Nick Pope. What say you? And it puts you in a difficult position. One, you may not have the answers, or two, maybe you do have the answers and you can't speak about them, but here they are speaking about them, and that puts you in a difficult position. And how are you dealing with that? Are you forcing? Are you dancing every single day like you have to dance a little bit on this show right now?
Well, as I said earlier, I know where the line is, and the line is simply classified versus unclassified. So in one sense, the answer to the question is actually quite simple. Don't divulge classified information. Now, of course, people do look to me, because I worked on this, for some sort of explanation and say, well, look, come on, the Ministry of Defense released this. Can't you at least give us a kind of insider's perspective on what your thought processes were? And can't you contextualize it a bit? And yes, I'm happy to do that within the parameters that I discussed. And hopefully I have done so. I mean, interviews like this, I think, are an important part of it. And your questions, of course, we've got the advantage in that you've actually read this thing. It's amazing how many people actually haven't, or have just skimmed the executive summary, as opposed to drilling down deep into it. But you really do need to drill deep if you're to really understand it. And even then, without wanting to be too disparaging, unless you've got a background either in intelligence or with some of the more technical bits in science, it will go beyond you. A lot of it, the technical and scientific stuff, goes beyond me. I know what I don't know.
Right.
That's why I had colleagues in scientific and technical intelligence who could help me steer through some of this. But I know what I don't know, and when I come up against something where I don't have an answer, I'll say I don't know.
Well, okay. Now, Nick, let's suppose, and this is always fun to do, let's suppose the UAP and radiation comments were redacted. And it's 2 sentences, or it's 3 sentences. But let's say that section is redacted. And let's say that the Russian weaponization UAP comments were redacted. Would you have made those comments if they were redacted? But would you have made those comments if they were redacted? Would you have commented on that, or would you have considered that classified information, and would that have gotten you in trouble with the MOD if you had commented on those?
If it had not been released, no, I wouldn't have commented on it, just as I don't comment on the bits that are still redacted. If something is redacted, it falls under the exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act, and therefore it is judged still to be classified. Don't forget, the definition, the classification level of Project Condine's final report was secret UK eyes only. And I don't have the definition of that to hand, but it's something along the lines of information disclosure of which could cause catastrophic harm to the national interest. So absolutely, I would not have discussed it. And I mean, apologies to you, to John Burroughs, because of course it would have helped him. But no, and I would not have disclosed that. And yes, to answer the second part of your question, if it had been noticed, I probably would have got into trouble, yes.
And
it's not, this is, it's a difficult area, but something, and maybe we'll make a more general point about Edward Snowden and secret disclosure and whistleblowing more generally. I often hear people talk about whistleblowers as heroes, and I don't agree. And it's very easy for someone to say, I saw this and I realized instantly that this was a huge scandal and I had a right to disclose it. I had a duty that people have a right to know. Unless you are what we in the UK call, I don't know whether InfoSci people in the States use the same phrase, but unless you're the information owner, you really are not in a position to make an informed judgment about what the pros and cons of disclosing that information would be. So you may think, for example, this is completely harmless. It's people have a right to know this, but you may inadvertently do catastrophic harm to the national interest. So, as I say, unless you're the information owner, you really can't know. It's not your decision. It's not your. You don't have the knowledge to make an informed decision on whether something should or shouldn't be released.
When we're dealing with ufology and FOIA documents, it's one thing. A redaction to me, which I think is an honest redaction, is somebody's name and address. That's a redaction. You don't need that stuff to go public. I get that. I understand that. But when we're talking about UFOs and you have pages of redactions, and there's supposedly, from the government's point of view, nothing here anyway. UFOs don't exist, and that is their position. Then why do you have pages and pages, paragraphs and books of redactions when it's not just simply somebody's name and address? And that's the part that I'm uncomfortable with. And why hide that? What is the point of that in national security? And what is the definition of what is redactable and what isn't?
Well, I guess I mean, again, the literal definitions of all these exemptions are perfectly easy to find on the internet. I think in the UK, they're on the Ministry of Justice website, and they're very clearly defined. Now, they have to be interpreted, of course, and that's a subjective judgment very often. But let me give you a couple of examples of things that go further than names and addresses, but would still perhaps do harm. And one is, for example, I mentioned there is a couple of references in Project Condign to the former Soviet Union. Well, if you start saying too much about what you know about what's going on in other countries, particularly if they're not friendly countries, you actually might start disclosing inadvertently methods and sources of gathering that intelligence in the first place. Now, worst case scenario, that's a human source and you get someone killed. Slightly better, but still a catastrophe, of course. You might be tapping into some form of communication, and then if it's revealed that you've tapped into it, the other side knows that you're reading their mail, and they take countermeasures, and suddenly that's no longer available to you. So that's one aspect, methods and sources. Another aspect, which is often overlooked in all this, is, for example, the capabilities of a military radar system. If you start talking about UFO sightings correlated by radar, and then you start saying, well, we detected it at a range of X, at a height of Y, and here's the technical data, suddenly the other side knows how good your radars are. So there are a number of reasons why things can be blacked out, and it's not necessarily, hey, we've got a spaceship hidden away in an Air Force hangar somewhere. It is something less exciting than that, but it's still, there's a very good reason for blacking it out.
Or it could be we have a spaceship somewhere in a hangar that is blacked out.
Maybe.
Would you? Let me ask you this, Nick. This is direct, and we're on a radio show right now. Would you necessarily twist the truth, or I'll use the word lie? Would you lie to? Or I don't want to be negative in my context of the question, but would you bend the truth in order to answer a question from me?
No, I don't think so. I would do one of two things. I would do what every single person does every single day with everything. I'd probably put a spin on it.
What does that mean? Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, let me think of a classic government example of putting a spin on something is if, I don't know, if some embarrassing secret gets leaked out, you say, well, this is a good day for freedom of information and open government.
Right.
So there's always a spin you can put on something. So, but I mean, we spin things. People spin every day, in a sense. You just put an interpretation on something to make your point. I mean, if I don't know, it's just human nature. I think that if we got into other areas, no, I wouldn't wouldn't lie. I would simply say that's an area that I can't discuss. So I would get into no comment.
I want you to be uncomfortable. I told you today. I said, Nick, I'm going to get you to go there. But with your background, I totally respect and appreciate you coming on the show. We're friends outside of the show, and I get that. But with you, you're so interesting, and I know that there's so much more there, and I just wish I could get it out of you. And I appreciate you doing the dance. I want you to just, feel the collar of your shirt, once or twice during the show going, phew, man, church is going there. That's what I want.
Well, sure, you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't. And I mean, this will probably start a couple of conspiracy theories, but when I was still working for the Ministry of Defense, I mean, one of the things that I had was media training, and that takes the form both of general awareness about the media and the way that they work, but also in interview skills. And part of that, as any politician knows, is dealing with difficult questions. And I mean, there are a number of tactics with that. And I mean, it verges sometimes on the comic and the ridiculous. The old cliche, talking about changing subjects, the old cliche of the politician saying, well, that's a very interesting question, and I'm glad you asked me that. But the real issue, and the issue on which I think your listeners want to be informed, is this, and then you go on to talk about something else.
Did you ever hang on for my mic switch is shorting out. There it is, it's back. I have a cough button, and when I hit that, I'm clearing my throat in between questions when you're talking, clearing my throat and whatever, drinking coffee, doing what I'm doing. And then when I engage it again, sometimes it's shorting out. So that's what that is. And see, it's doing it again. Okay. Did you ever find yourself in a position with the MOD when you were speaking to the public that you knew that you were putting a spin on it and that you weren't necessarily telling the truth? Were you comfortable with that?
I think almost every time we engage with the public, we put a spin on it. And I mean, the classic example of that is the phrase "no defense significance." As I've said on many occasions, the Ministry of Defense public position on UFOs for decades was to downplay the true extent of our interest, our involvement, the resources that we put into this, financial, intellectual, technological, whatever. And we simply, when this question came up, whether it came up in the British Parliament, whether it came up through the press office with an inquiry from the media, or whether it was in letters from the public, we would simply reply with almost a form standard response saying that we glance at these reports to see if there's anything of any defense interest, but over the years no evidence has been found to suggest anything of any defense significance. Now, in a sense, that no defense significance soundbite is itself a piece of spin. I don't think you would say it's an outright lie, but it's probably not the full story. So does that count as a lie by omission? I don't know. But certainly when you look at, for example, the Rendlesham Forest case, is that really no defense significance by any reasonable definition?
No.
No, I don't think so.
Right. Did you ever, and I have to reference The Prisoner and Patrick one more time. Did you ever, driving home from work, now that you were followed by a black limo, I'm not going there, but did you ever drive away from the MOD just pounding your hand on the dashboard going, you know what, screw this? I'm going to come out. I need to speak about this. Was there ever a genuine frustration there that you were fighting the man?
No, I don't think so. It was my job. I had sworn an oath to Queen and country. It was my job.
Right. And if you did pound your desk, would you wind up in the village?
Probably wind up, I don't know, in the section that deals with procurement of pencils or something.
Really quick, we're at the top of the hour. I have to ask you, since I've made that reference to The Prisoner, did you watch that? Did you watch every episode?
Yes, I did. Yes, loved it.
Loved it. Is it truly, the remake was garbage, by the way, the recent one, but truly one of the great moments in television history, I think, is that series and what it did. Have you ever been to the village, the actual village?
I haven't. No, it's on my bucket list.
It's on my bucket list too. And it still looks the same. When you go and you look at pictures, you can take tours and go check it out. It's fascinating. And for everybody out there in Twitter land right now that's listening, if you've seen The Prisoner, let me know what you think about it. And if you haven't, or if you have and somebody else hasn't, post ways to watch The Prisoner, because we're talking about it all night, and a lot of people have no idea what you and I are talking about right now, but truly, truly great stuff.
Yes, absolutely cult TV.
Yeah, it is. It is. And in a weird way, the British, how do I say this? In cinema and on TV, they have a way of poking fun and writing about themselves. The culture there is in a certain way. And The Prisoner, I think, represents British culture on a lot of different levels. And it exposes you to British culture. Not so, on a lot of different levels. Number one, number two, number three, the organization there and how it was done, but also the village, the chessboard, just every aspect of British life, I think is represented in The Prisoner in a microcosm.
Yes, and I think you could probably say the same about series such as The Avengers,
yes,
Quatermass, Doctor Who, some of those classic ones too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, love The Prisoner. And I was in Central America in Panama, and Armed Forces Network was our only American TV down there at that time. If you can imagine, it was before cable and before all of that stuff. So, and it came on for 5 hours a night. I think it came on at 5 o'clock in the evening, 5 p.m. My memory could be wrong. It might have been longer, but it turned off at 10 o'clock. That's it. So in general, I didn't watch TV for years. There was nothing to watch, but they ran The Prisoner 2 years in a row. And that's how I didn't have any other TV, and all I could watch was The Prisoner. And I absorbed it, and I have it on DVD. I watch it all the time. I love that series. So where am I here? I'm at the top of the hour. I have now done one station break, Nick. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network. Monday, we're syndicating with KGRA. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking with Nick Pope. Hey, Nick, you want to take some phone calls?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to open up the phone lines. 323-825-5045, 323-825-5045. Sure enough, okay, it didn't take long. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Nick Pope.
Hi, how you doing, Nick? Nick, my name is Dino, and I have something to ask. We were referencing The Prisoner, and it was one of my shows, too, that I watched, and we actually had analysis programs in my local PBS station where people would call in and discuss it for months. But the key point that I want to ask you, Mr. Pope, is with all the knowledge that I hope you've gained, through all the years from having left the MOD, you've read the book After Disclosure by Dolan, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is along those lines. In the sense of The Prisoner, you remember that he was always resistant. And he was always asked, who is number one? And they kept telling him, you are number 6. And people didn't get that to the end. And that's what I want to ask you, because you are now Mr. Pope. You are. And what else can you tell us? That's all I wanted to say, Jimmy.
Thank you, Dino. What say you, Nick? Wow.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it, I have to say. I don't know. Am I number 1? Am I number 2? Or am I number 6? I don't know how I would characterize myself. But yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on that.
Well, and I think what he's asking, I kind of alluded to this earlier, which is no matter what you want to do, people are always going to look at you as somebody that's holding back, and something, about UFOs that you haven't told us yet, and you are going to wear that for the rest of your life.
Yes, I mean, I think I saw something on the internet the other day which said, isn't it funny that whatever comes out on this, certainly when I was doing this job at the MOD, when somebody writes to the Queen, when somebody writes to the Prime Minister, they always get a reply from me. Now, actually, and somebody said, with Dino's call in mind, somebody was saying, well, don't all roads lead back to me? Now, I would say, no, absolutely not. I think very often when somebody writes to the Prime Minister or the Queen, the SME, the subject matter expert, is asked to, on the behalf of the Prime Minister or whoever, to reply. So you send a letter back and it says, the Prime Minister has asked me to thank you for your letter asking about UFOs. As the official responsible for this issue, I can tell you this. So now, does that make me number 1 or number 6 or number 2? I don't know.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Nick Pope. Who is calling?
Hi, Nick. This is Brandon from Boston. First-time caller, Jimmy.
Hey, Brandon. How are you tonight, man?
All right. Really digging the show. Listen every night. Had a question for Nick. He mentioned, first of all, I love the Prisoner series, the old Patrick McGowan series, and his ties to MI5 and MI6, and even back to Alan Turing and what went on there. But my question had to do specifically with Doctor Who, Nick. What themes and poking funs and microcosms of the British culture have you seen through Doctor Who, especially? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Yeah, great question.
Well, I guess the whole concept of unit, which very much when I started watching Doctor Who in the 70s was United Nations Intelligence Task Force and Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, of course. So this idea that the world would be facing this alien menace, and up against it on one side was this archetypal British officer and gentleman. And there's a classic line that I think gets to the heart of this, and I'll probably misquote it, but I don't know if you remember, there was an episode, Doctor Who called, I think, Inferno, and this dealt with a sort of devil-like creature. And at one point, the Brigadier gave an instruction to one of his soldiers, and he said, "Chap with the wings there, 5 rounds rapid," or something like that. And, just the idea of engaging this otherworldly presence in this quintessentially British way, this almost restrained way. You could almost see them breaking for afternoon tea in all of this. And I think that ran through a lot of Doctor Who, and as did the idea of almost behaving like a gentleman. The Doctor hardly ever used weapons, for example, which was where UNIT came in quite handy, because, of course, that's where you got the sort of gunfights that some sci-fi fans wanted to see in. But the Doctor himself hardly ever used weapons, and that was an interesting take on it. So yes, there's something very British about it, something peculiarly British. I think whereas an American series, it would have been all laser fights and things. There was something a little bit more, well, can't we think our way out of this about Doctor Who?
I want to ask you a couple of direct questions. When you release a book, and it's like your latest one with Penniston and Burroughs, do you have to hand that manuscript over to the MOD for review?
Yes, absolutely. Just because it's very difficult. It goes back to what I was saying a little earlier, that unless you're the information owner, you really can't make an informed decision about whether something is or is not classified. And it would be very easy for me to write a book and say, oh, yeah, I think that's been declassified, and then get it spectacularly wrong. So, yes, when I write a book, whether it's Encounter in Rendlesham Forest or even my 2 sci-fi novels, I've written 2 sci-fi novels, Operation Thunderchild and Operation Lightning Strike.
Right.
Those had to be pre-submitted for security clearance, and I make no apology for that. I mean, that is just simply because it is very difficult sometimes to recollect exactly where the line is.
Did they redact anything from Rendlesham?
I can't go into details about the security process itself. But yes, what I can say is that I did have to pre-submit. And indeed, if I go on to write future books, I will have to submit. But one isn't supposed to discuss the clearance process, let alone changes and things, because self-evidently, if you're dealing with the whole issue of classification, you draw attention to the very thing that, of course, you're not supposed to be saying.
Sure. My next question is, what did they tell you to take out?
Well, I think I've dealt with that. Or not, as the case may be.
Okay. Would you tell me off air?
No. I mean, the only there's an old saying, isn't there? The only way to keep a secret is not to tell anyone.
Oh. I know a honeypot. So, did you read Peter Robbins' review of Rendlesham and his critique, and his book that he wrote in response to yours?
Yes, and recently I read a review of his book about my book about his. Yes, I did.
Okay, and yeah, I've read it too as well. Man, I don't want to. I don't want to get into any kind of contest between the two of you, but did you address any of his specific points? Not getting specific here. We don't need to, but
yes. Last year I responded and I said, look, number one, our book isn't about Larry Warren. It's the story as told through the eyes of John Burroughs and Jim Penniston. Number two, if you want to believe that it's all part of a sinister government disinformation plot, as I said earlier, to you, nothing I can say is going to change your mind on that. And I think that's about all there was to say. I mean, I think I like Peter, but it would be very easy, I think, to say this is just riding on the coattails of Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, and I don't want to go there, but
sure.
it is unfortunate. But yeah, I've responded. The book's not about Larry Warren. There's really, frankly, not much else to say.
Do you? When was the last time you spoke to Peter?
Let me think. It was probably at the Citizens' Hearing on Disclosure, I think.
So 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
When was that?
Yeah,
was that May? I don't know. May, was it 2013, I think?
Yeah, I almost said 2012, 2013. So it seems longer than that. That's only a year and a half. Maybe it was only 2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes these things, it all blurs into one these days.
Well, my question is this, and I also have a comment for you directly. But are you guys cool today, or is there some animosity that is building up
Not on my side. I've never had any problem at all. Like I say, I've said our book was never about Larry Warren, and that's why he doesn't really appear in it that much. I certainly am not interested, or I'm not interested in any kind of feuds about any of this.
Yeah, and which is my point. I don't want to go there. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Nick Pope. Who's calling?
Hi, Nick Pope. This is Dimetric from Long Island.
What was
now? I wanted to ask, as a former member of the MOD, when it comes to concerns about people who have had missing time and maybe even have been taken by extraterrestrials, not saying that this is definitely happening, is that considered a threat?
Thank you for the call. Great question.
Yes, I certainly took the view that if just one of those claims turned out to be true, self-evidently it would be a threat. I mean, it would be, just from a very basic point of view, it would be a violation of the territorial integrity of the UK's airspace. Now, I know that might strike people as a somewhat strange way to come at this, but in a sense, that's the perspective, that's the mindset with all of this. So yes, if anything is in our airspace, we want to know what it is. But certainly, if it is doing something to people, then absolutely, it's a defense and national security issue.
Back to I want to get back to Peter Robbins for a second. So there was a picture that I think Peter sent it to me. I forget where I saw it, but it's you, Peter, Larry Warren, at your house when you were a kid. Do you remember that picture? You guys were sitting on a couch.
Oh yeah,
and I think you guys were reading alien porn or something from a book, right? you know the picture I'm talking about.
Sure.
And I look at that and I see a bunch of happy people. Everybody in that picture is happy I just feel like it's not that way today. I'm not trying to start a fire here. I'm trying to bring it all back together is what I'm saying. Is there a way to, can everybody just kiss and make up and figure out a way to get this done?
Well, I hope so. And John Burroughs certainly said a while ago that he thought the thing would be to try and sit everyone round a table. I have absolutely no problem with anyone in this field. I mean, it all, sad to say, seems to be the other way around, because I'm always going to be the bad guy here, the real life man in black, so to speak. But my door is always open, and as I say, but frankly, it's difficult to see what I can say that's going to help move this forward.
Well, you and I have talked about this a lot, and we will get everybody together. And I don't think it's about animosity that's built up. I think it's just for the UFO community out there. When it comes to Rendlesham, Nick, it's a crazy situation where we have when you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 witnesses that have come forward and spoken about this, and you can go all the way to Adrian Bestenza to the guys that aren't in the forefront. So we have the 3 or 4 guys that are obvious, and Halt, Warren, Burroughs, Peniston, and yourself and Linda and the other researchers that have and Peter, of course, Robbins. But the story, everybody doesn't have the same consistent thing. And if you have 5 witnesses to a car accident, you're not going to get the same story out of those 5 witnesses, no matter what you choose to do. The car color is not going to be the same between 5 people. And that's just the way that it is. People see what they see. They witness what they witness. We've had memory loss and possibly other dark, sinister things that could have been involved with drugs or whatever. I don't know. But and I think that is indeed the case. And so for for ufology in general. That's why you want everybody together, just to sit down so we can discuss it in a more like a court. You know what I mean? Witness testimony where everybody just gets together and then we can piece it together for ourselves, not necessarily for the witnesses. Make sense?
It sounds good to me. I mean, obviously, I'm not comfortable with people using my book to kind of generate publicity for themselves. But I mean, if it's all in the spirit of openness and moving things forward, if things are constructive, absolutely.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest was the story as seen through the eyes of John Burroughs and Jim Penniston. And, you know, if they didn't see Larry out there, then nothing in the world that I can say is going to change that.
Well, there was big distance, too, in between the two sites, you know, so that's totally possible, too. But that's neither here nor there. I will ask you this. Well, you know what? I went back and I watched some vintage Larry Warren stuff, and I got to tell you that some of the most amazing testimony that I have ever seen. And listening to Larry speak all those years ago, and listen to his accounting of everything, I think it's as strong as anything that I have ever heard. I mean,
he's a great guy. He's very articulate, and he's been a great champion for this case. I mean, he was the first whistleblower. He doesn't need the irony of this is he doesn't need Peter cheerleading for him.
Okay. But I think we all need a partner, you know, just like you with Penniston and Burroughs. You know, it's the same kind of situation. But let me ask you this: what is your opinion? What happened in Rendlesham? As direct as I can lay it out there, what happened in Rendlesham?
Well, again, I'm going to have to give you the answer that I gave with the more general question. I don't know. I can tell you what it wasn't, but I can't tell you what it was.
Okay, what wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't a fireball. It wasn't some practical joke that got out of hand. It wasn't some secret test of the guard force to see how they will react to exotic stimuli. It doesn't seem to be some secret prototype spy plane or drone. You know, and as for the other,
it wasn't the lighthouse.
Oh, I mean that's beyond ridiculous. I think that's it's been. I know it's a favorite on TV shows because it's so crazy. It elicits a reaction from the witnesses. You know, like you've got to be kidding, and of course that's the point. But I mean, it's never been a serious theory. As to the other more exotic theories, extraterrestrials, time travelers, interdimension, well, you know, interesting if true, but there isn't any evidence for that either.
Well, I'll flip it over to you, though. Can you prove that it wasn't, if you want to say it like that, when there's no evidence? Is there evidence that's saying that it wasn't?
No, but I suppose, again, coming at this from the point of putting up a theory, it's incumbent on the person making the exotic claim to prove it, not the other way around.
And what would inspire you to, Nick, what would inspire you to write the book if you didn't believe the testimony of Penniston and John Burroughs?
Oh, I believe the testimony, but I don't know what it points to. I don't know what you know, it actually all means. And in a sense, if I did, we wouldn't have commissioned intelligence studies like Project Condign. I mean, that's, in a sense, it's probably the best bit of proof that the British government wasn't covering up the truth about this, because if we were, we would have had no need to have commissioned an intelligence study to look into it. We would have known the answer already.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, what I mean is that if you already know the answer to a question, you don't ask it. I mean, in other words, if we really did have a spaceship hidden away in a hangar somewhere, we wouldn't have commissioned an intelligence study, Project Ondine, to ask the question, what does all this mean? We'd already know.
Right. Well, what's your response? Colonel Halt came on this program. I'm not saying this through third party. I mean, he told me directly that it was E.T. And what's your response to that?
Well, I know that Colonel Halt has said that, and I know that he's going to give a talk in the UK, I think, this summer. I don't have the exact date to hand, but he's promised a few bombshells. He's promised some definitive evidence, actually going back to what you were discussing about the supposed controversy about encounter in Rendlesham Forest. Colonel Halt has promised a few bombshells that'll perhaps sort out for once and for all who was there and who wasn't. Whether any of his bombshells are going to get into the issue of absolutely definitively proving what it was that people like Burroughs and Penniston encountered, I don't know. But in a sense, yeah, I think I'm looking forward to seeing what Colonel Halt's got to say this summer.
Yeah, and he has said that, and when he said, the beams of light that were coming down, and I responded, my question, well, what was it then? And he says, well, it was off-world. It was E.T. And we're talking about the deputy base commander. We all know this, but for that to come from a ranking officer in the military to make that kind of statement, is it? How do I want to say this? Was it memories implanted in him that force him to believe a statement like that, or was it something that was it exactly as he says it is?
Well, only
am I making sense?
Yeah, you are, but only he can answer that question. I mean, I don't know whether, and he should know the difference, of course. I mean, it's one of the basic rules of intelligence, but where the line is between what you know and what you think. Now, so when Colonel Halt makes those sorts of statements, my question is, well, is this what he knows or is this what he believes? And I don't know. Only he can answer that question.
Do you think, after talking with Penniston and Burroughs as much as you have, do you think that they were manipulated? Do you think that something happened after the fact?
I don't think there's any doubt that there were some fairly aggressive debriefings. And again, Colonel Halt has gone on the record about this, and he was certainly in a well-placed position to know. And I mean, again, this is a direct quote that we put in the book for him. Halt said, Office of Special Investigations operatives harshly interrogated 5 young airmen, some of them in shock at the time, who were key witnesses. And then he went on to say, drugs such as sodium pentothal, often called a truth serum, when used with some form of brainwashing or hypnosis, were administered during these interrogations, and the whole thing has had damaging and lasting effects on the men involved. So now that's Colonel Halt's statement, and one has to assume that he made that from a position of knowledge.
And being the deputy base commander, the question is obvious. Some of the things were done without his knowledge, and I think he's angry about that.
He is angry, and certainly he said that even as deputy base commander, it was clear to him that in the aftermath of this incident, there were people coming and going and removing items pertaining to the investigation, speaking to some of the witnesses, direct and indirect, and this was almost without precedent. We know, again, one of the documents that we put in the back of the book, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, is a document which shows that the Commander-in-Chief, United States Air Force in Europe, General Gabriel, flew personally to the base after the incident, was briefed, and took items back to his headquarters at Ramstein in Germany. So again, this was a highly unusual situation, and even an experienced officer of the rank of Colonel Holt was nonplussed by all the comings and goings.
Does the Queen know about not only about Rendlesham, but does the monarchy at all get involved with this subject?
I don't think I'd better comment on the royals. There are obviously particular sensitivities when it comes to the royal family, and I'm not going to go down that route, if you'll excuse me.
Okay. Well, is she really a reptilian?
Certainly not.
Definitively, we can put that to bed right now.
Right now.
Okay. I say that in jest. I have a couple of questions here I want to bang out in Twitter. There's about 100 that I have ignored. I'm going to start at the top and work down. Dennis wants to know, Nick, what is your personal opinion on what UAP are beyond I do not know?
Well, I think I would be very surprised if there was one single answer to all this. I suspect that if the history of this subject, the definitive history is ever written, we'll find a lot of different things going on. I don't think there's going to be a sort of, Wizard of Oz parting of the curtains moment and a sort of, that's it. So I suspect there are multiple explanations for this.
He follows up with, are you the devil's advocate of UAP?
Well, I guess if you believe the conspiracy theories, yes, I am.
Let me scroll down. There's so many here. Let's see. Okay. Ask Nick. This comes from Puppy. Ask Nick if he would confirm misconception, untruth to protect classified info.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Would you confirm a misconception or untruth to protect classified info?
I don't know. It's a very good question. I think that's fairly close to the line when it comes to telling a lie. And so I suspect not. I suspect I would veer into no comment.
Oh, man, that's not fair. Okay. Yeah. Well, that answers the question then. You're suggesting to read between the lines. That's fine. I get it. This comes from Brandon, and Brandon says he's not the Brandon that called from Boston.
Okay.
He says, did you ever consider the possibility of being fed findings by the MOD to unknowingly distract the public from the truth?
No. I mean, again, it's simply not the way we would work with any subject.
Okay, and this goes back to ancient alien theory. You've been on Ancient Aliens. Yes?
Yes.
And if you're on Ancient Aliens and you don't believe and prescribe to ancient alien theory, what's your position for being on the show?
Well, I suppose maybe on that show I'm the total skeptic. I was asked factual questions and I gave factual answers. I mean, I think very often in TV shows there are dissenting views. So I suspect that when it comes to Ancient Aliens, I am the dissenting view.
Is that the position that you feel that you took on Ancient Aliens?
Well, I can't remember. I've been interviewed on literally hundreds of TV shows, and I mean, I really can't recall the specifics of individual interviews.
I can't either. I can't go back and recall not only stuff that I have done, but you specifically on Ancient Aliens. I can't recall.
No, I'd have to re-watch them, and I'm not sure. Just in case anyone thinks that I sort of sit down and watch all my own TV shows, I don't. So I mean, very often I haven't even watched the shows that I'm on.
Mark Davich just said, "Is Nick reptilian?"
Only a little.
I have to go there. Are you friends with David Icke?
No, I'm not sure we've ever even met. I mean, I think his views are pretty far out, to be honest. So we're not friends, and I'm not sure with his various views that we would end up as friends. But I mean, clearly he's a presence in this subject, of course.
Did you watch him on TV when you were growing up?
No, I probably watched him play football. I mean,
that's what I mean. Yeah, did you? And his sports casting, did you follow him? He was a pretty big celebrity back in the day, wasn't he?
Yes, I probably did. I probably did before he got into all this.
Okay, this comes in from Nick. Does Nick suspect that you might have ever been chemically debriefed by the MOD?
No. I mean, again, I worked for them for 21 years on a wide range of subjects, and my last job was actually in security. I mean, it's just not the way that we do business.
See, and this is the thing. This is what I find so fascinating about you, is you can't escape these questions and the view of the public. You just can't do it. How do how do you deal with it every single day? I know that you get the emails. I know that people ask you. Here, I'm fielding these questions from our audience here. This is what you deal with. Is it tough? How do you deal with it?
Oh, I think one has to develop a thick skin in this business. I mean, if I let those sorts of things get to me, I mean, I probably couldn't function. So it's just water off a duck's back. I mean, of course, working for the government, I'm going to get these sorts of accusations, and I'm going to be the bad guy to a lot of people. I'm sure Colonel Holt gets it. John Alexander gets it. Those of us that have been in that position, it comes with the territory.
I'll say this for the audience out there. I know Nick. Nick knows me. You've always been very open. And, when you're away from you're a very open, approachable guy and a very likable guy and very warm. And, the perception of who you are, well, of course, you come from a very, crazy background, but I just want to say this to everybody. If they only knew the Nick that I know, you're a very approachable guy. And not to say that you would spill the beans. You're not approachable like that. I'm not insinuating anything, but I just think that you're a very warm guy. Most people think that you're very dark and sinister, and you represent the man.
Yes. Well, no, thank you for your comments.
Well, I don't even know where to go with that, but it's really true. I know exactly why people ask the questions that they do. That you are hiding something, and that currently right now you probably got email today about what to say about something, and that you're in constant contact with the MOD, and that is your job today. That is your position in society.
Yes, I've certainly heard that, and I mean, when I was still living in the UK, of course, even after I left the Ministry of Defence, I was regularly back in Ministry of Defence main building for social functions and things, and that probably added fuel to the fire. And then, of course, people see me on the BBC talking about the release of the files, and they think, well, he's obviously still working for them, but I'm genuinely not.
Have you, and we'll start to wrap this up. Thank you for hanging on a few minutes late, but have you been contacted since then, or have you been completely on your own?
Well, I'm still in touch with a number of friends and colleagues at the Ministry of Defence. Even now, I live in America, but not contacted, perhaps in the sense that the questioner means. I mean, there's no sort of, I wonder if you could do a little job for us, old boy. None of that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's a good answer. Have you ever, has anybody come up to you and whispered in your ear unexpectedly, Nick, you need to chill out? Has that ever happened?
No.
Okay. Are the Men in Black real? And that's where I was going with that.
Well, I suppose we were the Men in Black. I mean, we investigated this. I don't know whether some people would say covered it up. We certainly downplayed it, and we tended to wear dark suits. So maybe we were the real Men in Black.
Wow.
But
that's disclosure.
But we didn't get the fancy gadgets, sad to say.
So you guys did wear dark suits when you were investigating. Did you freak anybody out with that? And this is my point. Whenever I go to like a UFO conference, some seminar, I'll always put on the black suit and stand in the back with some sunglasses on. I do it all the time. I'm not kidding. I'm not joking about this.
Well, there's an old joke about that, and I've this is another subject altogether. I mean, one time I sat in the back of a UFO conference, kind of incognito before I was known in this, and while I was doing the job. And I mean, if anyone's ever sitting in the front row in a dark suit and glasses, they most definitely don't work for the government. It's the anonymous person in the T-shirt, or perhaps the two women reading a magazine. They're probably the intelligence officers.
Thank you so much for coming on tonight, Nick. I had a great time. What are you doing now? Do you have another book in the works?
No. Encounter in Rendlesham Forest is the latest one. I'm obviously going to write other things in due course. I'm working on a lot of TV projects, currently in a lot of shows that are out and about. UFOs Declassified, season 2 of NASA's Unexplained Files, a number of other ones. And of course, conference-wise, the next big one on the horizon is Contact in the Desert. So contactinthedesert.com, I think. And that's 29th to 31st of May. And
what are you going to speak on there?
Do you know, I haven't actually refined that yet, but I'd be very surprised if I didn't use the opportunity to update people on the very latest news on Rendlesham Forest, and particularly the veterans, the VA and John Burroughs and the related issues. So I'm sure there'll be some Rendlesham material in there, but I will refine that over the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure something will go up on the Contact in the Desert website fairly shortly.
Yeah, last year at Contact, I did want to thank you. You came up, I know you'll remember this, you came up and took a bunch of pictures with all of the Fadernauts and the contest winners and hung out with everybody. That was very cool of you. And this year, with all of the contest winners that we'll be bringing out, I can't wait for you to meet everybody and hang out with us once again. Thank you so much.
Well, I look forward to it, and thank you for having me on the show.
Always the best. Thank you, Nick Pope. We'll see you in, it's less than 2 months now, May 29th.
It is. Look forward to it.
All the best. Thank you, Nick. Nick Pope, everybody. Nick Pope. I'm going to take a quick break. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you, Nick. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Click on Contact in the Desert. Enter. Tomorrow, 5 more names will be drawn. I'll be back right after this.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on jimmychurchradio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is jimmychurchradio.com.
JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Fade to Black. bespoke radio for the masses. Phone lines are open, 323-825-5045. I got a little time left. 323-825-5045. You can also Skype in Fade 2 Black 14. 323-825-5045. All right. Thank you, Nick Pope. Look, I went direct. Nick is a gentleman and a scholar, and I think he was as forthwith as he could be on everything. And there you go. I think that was one of the best interviews that not only that I've done on the show, but that I've heard him do. And there you go. I think he will always be forced into doing the dance. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. I'm going to refer back to Twitter really quick. Les says, Jimmy, did he just say he works for the government as in present tense? Actually, Les, that is a very good point, because Nick did say about an hour ago in the interview, he said we a couple of times. I was going to go back and call him on it. I was referring to my memory at that point, and I was thinking to myself, did he just say we? He said we twice. And I thought that was interesting. Could have been a slip of the tongue. It could have been something else. I'm going to go back, and certainly I'll depend on all of you. I'm going to need to go back and listen to that portion of the interview, which I never do, but I do want to go back and catch that. And if anybody caught it, wow, look who's calling. Mark Schwartz. How are you, Mark? Mark, are you there? Mark, you're live. Mark. 3. Mark, pick up the phone. He hung up. That was Mark Schwartz from Truth Funders. Maybe he just had that bad cell connection. Mark, call back. Oh, here he is. Let's try this one more time. Mark, are you there?
I'm going over the Golden Gate Bridge right now, Jimmy, so I apologize if I drop out and die. I just wanted to call and say that was an amazing show. That was just phenomenal. I thought one of the most exciting shows I've heard this week by far.
I just I told Nick earlier today, man. I said, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to go direct. He said, Jimmy, bring it. Let's go. And I wanted to see how far I could get until I heard no comment. That's what I wanted to do.
Your style is just freaking awesome. Like, you just kill it. And it was like all in good nature too. So I just wanted to say that I'm probably going to get disconnected here any second from the Golden Gate Bridge, but I just wanted to call and say,
okay, that's all good, Mark. Now, but let me ask you: you did a radio show tonight, your first radio show?
Yeah, the first Truth Funders radio show on IRN Network.
And how did that go for you?
Oh man, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. I'm not the host. I guess I'm the co-host. It gives me a whole new respect for what you do, my friend. You are a master of the work.
It ain't easy, is it?
No, it's not easy at all. And I mean, it takes cojones to do what you do. And I think that everybody who listens to you every night is really lucky, and they know that. They know how special you are. You're like a diamond in the rough.
I don't know how to take that, but it's hard, man. And I saw your announcement of that. I was prepping for the show, and I couldn't go over and catch it. But I just had to ask. I'm glad that you called tonight. I wasn't expecting this, and so I just had to ask you, how did that go? And I know you had Jesse Marcel on, and there you go. Are you going to do this from now on? Are you like going to do this every week, every day?
We're going to be doing it, and then I say everybody.
We're losing you, Mark. Okay, Mark, we're losing you. I know you're on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I don't think that they have a cell tower in the middle of that thing. All I'll talk to you tomorrow, Mark. Drive safe.
Good.
Mark Schwartz, truthfunders.com, truthfunders.com. I was just reading some of the comments before I get out of here. Brad Kelly says, I think he knows it was E.T. He can't admit it because of his oath. He basically said it wasn't anything else. I agree. Dennis says, I heard we, but I say we all the time, or I say us, meaning people. Narrowed eyes, though. Yeah, I heard it too. I heard it twice. Let's see here. J Star says, way to go. You pulled no punches, wrestled him to the ground, and nearly choked him out. Well, no. Nick is a friend. But one of the things, and I'll say this about having somebody like Nick on that, I do consider a friend. I do. I really do. It allows a certain barrier to come down. And he knows how I do an interview and how I do a conversation. It's not an interview, it's a conversation, and he knows that. So I think he's able to, instead of get angry and frustrated, to stay with it and to be honest. And I think he owes the audience that because of the show, and he wants to come on the show and present in an honest fashion with anybody. But if he gets uncomfortable with somebody that he doesn't know, quite possibly he could hang up or he could get defensive. And that didn't happen tonight, and it never would with Nick, with me on the show. Like I said at the end of the conversation, I want everybody to really understand the Nick that I know. He's a very genuine guy. He really, really is. And I think you can ask any of the Fadernauts that met him last year. Okay, let's see. I had a couple of other things that I wanted to get to, but I don't have them. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap. Tomorrow night, we will be announcing 5 more winners with Contact in the Desert. Tomorrow night, we have Dr. Robert Davis on with us, so it's a twofer. We're going to have him on as a guest, and we will do Fader Night at the same time. He's got a great new book out. You can check that out. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com. Click. We'll be talking about that tomorrow night and taking your calls. This is Fade to Black. I had a great time tonight, and I got to tell you, I went through 2 cups, 2 big, hot, steaming mugs of coffee during the show. So that's it, man. It's a little boy's room for me. Thank you, everybody that called in tonight. Thank you to Nick Pope. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Kamarian. Shows produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Thanks to LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Method of Signaling. Method, thank you for everything tonight. Music by Doug Aldridge. Intro by Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Tomorrow night is Fader Night. We have Dr. Robert Davis. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I want everybody to be safe. See ya.